At the age of 21 years, Michael Koigi Wamwere quit his university education in the United States of America to come back to Kenya and join a struggle they called completing the Mau Mau Revolution. For 13 years, he was in prison, serving 4 different detentions, which had serious ramifications not only to him as an individual, but his family as well. He would later author a book titled I Refuse to Die, but part of his struggle was the dreadlocks he kept as a sign of defiance to the regime of the day. This is KTN's Untold Story. My name is Duncan Haemba. 66-year-old Michael Koigi Wamwere is not your ordinary Kenyan politician. For years, he was perceived by many as a radical political leader who'd never shy away from confronting power. He has had more detentions than any other politician in the country. He has been detained 4 times, a total of 13 years that have had serious ramifications to his family and himself. At the relatively tender age of 21 years in 1972, Koigi Wamwere quit his university education in the United States, where he was studying hotel administration, to come back home and fight for political and economic change against then-President Jomo Kenyatta's regime. He admits the decision to abandon education was a result of reading radical writings of Che Guevara, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King and Fidel Castro, among others.
I decided that, first of all, what I was studying at the university would not be relevant in terms of my contribution to this struggle. And secondly, that completing this Mau Mau revolution was, to me, more urgent than acquiring an education.
His outspoken criticism against the government landed him in trouble, earning him a record of 4 detentions, which began on Saturday, August 5th, 1975, running on and off until 1996. Koigi holds the record of having been detained the longest. He is the most detained Kenyan politician for 13 years that had serious effects on him physically, mentally, economically, and even socially.
It is my hope and prayer that nobody will suffer as long a detention or incarceration as I did. Therefore, this is the sort of record that should never be broken.
Of all his 4 detentions, Koigi says it's the first one in 1975 that shocked and shook him up. He was held in isolation, and even the most consequential of political events simply passed him by. Even the founding father of the Republic, Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, the man who sanctioned Koigi's incarceration, passed on while Koigi was still locked away. Kenyatta succumbed to what was described as natural causes owing to old age. Koigi was dumbfounded when in December 1978, 4 months after Kenyatta's death, he was released only to find that Kenya had a new president, Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi.
In that compound, there were 8 or so other detainees. But of course, they were not allowed to speak to me. But when the authorities were not close by, they would shout from the back of the cell that they were so and so, and I would tell them who I was. Despite that, it was traumatic being isolated, alone in the cell, not knowing whether I would be let out at all, not being allowed to speak to anyone, getting food that looked like very bad. And I started having, whenever I looked at the white wall of the cell, I started having some electric, I don't know what you call it. I would have some, it's like electric, it's like my eyes would have, first of all, I would see stars on the wall, and I would feel as if some electricity was burning my eyes. And I wondered what it was.
After being released in 1978, the radical Koigi never relented in his fight against what he termed as injustice in Kenya, and this saw him land 3 more detentions: 1982 after the attempted coup, in July 1990, and September 1993. His politics would soon land other members of his family in problems. During his last detention, his 4 other siblings were apprehended as well, making 5 the total number of family members held by authorities at the same time. The arrests affected his parents.
You can imagine the sort of pain they felt, not just because I, who was the eldest son, was inside, but because no one at home would be safe just because the authorities were looking for me.
Already his July 1990 arrest and subsequent detention had shocked his aging father. The old man had hoped that his 4 detained sons would be released by the new administration, thinking the opposition would win against Kanu in the first multi-party election in December 1992.
That disappointment led to his having a stroke, which paralyzed part of his body, one side of his body. And you can now imagine that you can imagine you have 4 of us inside the prison. The man of the home, our father, has a stroke, and there is no, there was nothing that would make my mother think that we would be released soon. And I'm sure she must have started feeling that for this war to be won, everybody had to come forward and fight it. And I think it is at that point that mom started feeling that she had to join this fight if it went on like that.
If you win, will you release the last 7 political prisoners?
There's no, who are the political prisoners? Would you tell?
Koigi Wamwere.
If he committed crime, which is not political, it's not political, I don't regard it as a political prisoner.
Will you stop torture in Nyayo House? There was a political prisoner who was released.
Who told you we tortured somebody? Have you gone to Nyayo House yourself?
But we interviewed somebody who was 2 weeks ago who was tortured last year.
Oh, it is what you are being told, my gracious lady.
Soon the situation metamorphosed from bad to worse when Koigi was detained for the 4th time in September 1993, few months after he had been released. This was too much for his father, who suffered multiple strokes and passed on. Koigi's mother refused to bury their late father, insisting that the imprisoned be released first to attend his burial.
Other than feeling that my father deserved to be buried by his sons and not in their absence, which served very well, which would be perfect observation of the Kikuyu tradition, that an old man or a father is buried by his sons, of course, and daughters, but the sons are supposed to hold the head. and carry the casket. So my mother felt that we had a right to be allowed out just for burial and then get taken back to prison. We were quite willing to bear that situation.
For 3.5 years, the standoff remained amid pressure from the opposition, civil society groups, and the international community. Eventually, the government ceded ground and allowed the detained Wamwere brothers to come out and bury their late father after 3.5 years.
But it was a right that we deserved. We were not asking to be released. We were only asking that we be allowed to bury our father and be taken back to prison. That the government was being unreasonable about this just confirmed that a greater struggle needed to be organized against it, because it was a stubborn government. It could not concede some of the simplest rights that that people deserve. So that's really what led to, it is government stubbornness that led to my father being kept in the mortuary for 3.5 years until we were released and were able to bury him. With great honor, we felt for us it was really more than a victory that we were able to do our father this justice, especially given that our father had died from the pain of our incarceration. So the least we could do to him, after having suffered as he did, was to give him a decent burial.
He's facing a capital charge. Now sit down, please.
So
sit down. When I tell you sit down, sit. Sit down.
Having lost her husband while her 4 sons were in detention, Koigi's mother, Monica Wamwere, took a bold step of leading a campaign dubbed Release Political Prisoners. Fired up by support from now deceased Nobel laureate Professor Wangari Maathai, the group camped at Uhuru Park's Freedom Corner at the end of February 1992 and staged a hunger strike. On 3rd March the same year, police forcibly broke up the sit-in, leading to the world's famous episode of women stripping naked to ward off police beating. For several months after, the All Saints Cathedral offered sanctuary to mothers as they stayed put in the capital, demanding the release of their sons.
I started prayers for mothers and wives of political prisoners in St. Andrews. And the first 3 members people to attend were Miroge's mother, who was in jail, and Koigi mother's and Lyra's wife, Ida. When they came, we started prayers. Then the church, my church, when I was defrocked, the prayers could no longer continue in St. Andrews. Or anywhere. So it had to go to the Anglican Church, All Saints Cathedral. That's why the prayers for political prisoners' mothers went. Because Gitari was there and he was very tolerant. No other church leader other than Gitari could have tolerated that kind of thing. And then many women got courage. Then we went to Uhuru Park, Freedom Corner. And I said, Jesus said, if somebody takes your outer gown from you, give him even the inner one. And women took that literally. They took their clothes off.
Coming up after the break.
A lot of people think that we started the journey for dreadlocks. In fact, we didn't. This was imposed on us by prison authorities.
This is KTN News.
Blaze, be your own boss. You've experienced the summits, you have learned to earn, and now, are you ready for Kenya's biggest TV show? Coming to your screens, Blaze, Be Your Own Boss brings you 12 of Kenya's brightest and most ambitious young people to find out who will be the last boss standing. Meet the contestants, listen to their ideas, watch them as they take part in the most grueling business tasks with some of the biggest names in Kenyan business. Experience their journey as they develop their business ideas. And finally, witness them seek to win funding for their businesses and mentorship. Blaze, be your own boss.
This is KTN News.
During his third detention, Michael Koigi Wamwere and his compatriots acquired new identities. They vowed to keep their long hair, or the dreadlocks, as a symbol of defiance, though he admits it was not by design, but by default.
You know, a lot of people think that we started the journey for dreadlocks. In fact, we didn't. This was imposed on us by prison authorities. Because after we had been arrested and charged with treason, the one thing that prison authorities wanted to portray us were gorillas, freedom fighters, Mau Maus. And so to make us look so, whenever they took us back to prison and we asked them for a comb, to comb our hair and keep it smart, they would say that they didn't keep combs in prison.
But the dreadlocks soon became a trademark for their supporters, who proudly donned them as a symbol of struggle against Kanu's rule.
We noticed that people who came to court to give us support, some of them, especially one called Coming Soon, he would come with a portrait of us wearing the dreadlocks. And then we started to notice that the authorities would become angry at the portraits. And then we asked ourselves, if they are getting angry at the portraits, maybe these dreadlocks carry some power which is irritating to authorities. And then we looked back at the Bible where Samson's power lay in his dreadlocks. And we said, why not use this as an instrument of struggle? Now that they don't like it, let us like it.
This annoyed prison authorities, who schemed to have them shaved completely. But Team Koigi were not ready for that and vowed to only cut their hair after Kanu was removed from power.
We ended up managing to get the court to give us an injunction against prison authorities' attempts to cut off the dreadlocks. And I guess, and I believe that because of the injunction that we earned from the magistrate, ours became the only dreadlocks that went to prison several times without being cut. Even after release, when we continued to have it and we were almost immediately rearrested, we would go back to prison with the same hair, and we would use the same injunction to protect it against prison authorities. And later we would tell the country that we would keep this hair until Moi and his regime left power. Rainbow, rainbow, rainbow.
In December 2002, the opposition under the NAC banner handed KANU a resounding defeat at the ballot. Koigi Wamwere was elected Member of Parliament for Subukia constituency and sneaked to Parliament and was sworn into office with his dreadlocks still on.
And I think that the Speaker did not notice until I was ahead of him. When I was holding the Bible, he noticed that in fact I had the dreadlocks, but it was too late. But sometimes I wonder, even if he had noticed, before we were sworn in, we were not yet MPs. So what legal powers would he have to stop me having them? Unless he brought a barber there to wait for me to get to that point of being sworn, and he would say he must take the haircut before he is sworn. So it's really by accident.
How was it like swearing in an MP with dreadlocks?
Listen, the Speaker does not see. The members see for the Speaker. So the Speaker sits there until his attention is drawn to that fact. And when my attention was drawn to the mode of appearance or dressing of a member, then I suddenly see. You suddenly see what you are not seeing before. Because that is how it is. It is the House belongs to members. So it is the members who must complain to the Speaker. Now, until there's a complaint, you see nothing and you hear nothing. But once the members have complained, you suddenly see and you suddenly hear. And when that has been brought to your attention, then it becomes your duty to ensure that the right thing happens. And if there's something wrong, then that wrong is corrected.
And true to his word, on January 22nd, 2003, he fulfilled his 12-year promise of shaving his dreadlocks since KANU was no longer the ruling party. A promise that was fulfilled in full glare of the media, both local and international. Ironically, the venue for the much-anticipated event was the school that bears the name of the man who first detained Koigi, the Jomo Kenyatta High School in Nakuru.
I was a bit reluctant to shave it. I would have preferred to keep on wearing it. But then I knew that the vow I made was to the whole country and to the whole world. And I'm sure there were people watching. In any case, being in Parliament, I was not going to be allowed to continue keeping it. But I cut it reluctantly.
However, his 12 years of detention made him learn more bitter lessons in life on aspects, he says, many might be taking for granted.
I've come to discover that a parent suffers more pain for her children than the pain that children can suffer for a parent. And I therefore understand what sort of pain my mother was going through. All her children locked up. And after we came out of prison, of course, we must have wondered what we could do to compensate. But I think with this, other than being together again, we felt that our freedom was the best gift that our mother could have for her suffering.
His turbulent political activism life left his family wounded. His father paid the ultimate price with his life, suffering multiple strokes that eventually killed him as his sons remained in detention. That was the turning point in Koigi Wamwere's life. His mother, who put her life on the line, now lives a quiet life in Nakuru County.
The other thing that we have hoped for in terms of rewarding our mother is that we will never lose our freedom again. Because as I said, our father died from the loss of our freedom. If freedom were to be lost again, of course it would be a terrible blow to mother and to anybody who loves us and ultimately the country. So let me put it this way. We have tried to be the best sons that we can be to our mother. We know that we are indebted to her forever. We understand that she has done more for us than just to give birth to us. In fact, we feel that every time she had to fight for our freedom and release from prison was a rebirth, different from the earlier one. And so she has given birth to us severally, which makes her more than an ordinary parent. But I don't think that we shall ever be satisfied that we have treated our mother in the best possible way. We will continue to try, but probably we will never be able to give the perfect gift to our mother that we think we should give to her for everything that she did for us.
Duncan Hemba, KTN, The Untold Story.